So season 5 of the Twilight Zone wasn't a hoot and a half, but this episode was probably one of the most underrated episodes of Twilight Zone ever. Because you watch it for the first time, you say to yourself, maybe Twilight Zone should have became a comedy horror anthology, because my God, this was as black comedy as it goes. It's called Mr. Garrity and the Graves. It was a season 5 episode 32 of Twilight Zone, directed by the great Ted Post, story by Mike Korologos, teleplay by Rod Serling, featured music by the great Tommy Morgan, and appeared on May 8, 1964. Now, introducing Mr. Jared Garrity, according to the narration, played by John Denner, a gentleman of commerce who in the later half of the 19th century plied his trade in the wild and woolly hinterlands of the American West. And Mr. Garrity, if one can believe him, is a resurrector of the dead, which on the face of it certainly sounds like the bullets off the nickel. But to the scoffers amongst you, and you ladies and gentlemen from Missouri, don't laugh this one off entirely, at least until you've seen a sample of Mr. Garrity's wares, an example of his services. The place is Happiness, Arizona, the time about 1890, and you have I just entered a saloon where the bar whiskey is brewed, bottled and delivered from the Twilight Zone. So, as soon as the opening scene set, you know this is not going to be a normal Twilight Zone episode, because Garrity is a peddler, but basically he's stock and trade. If you don't give me money, I'm going to bring back people from the dead that either don't like you or do you murdered or can cause harm in this life or the next. It's the year 1890 when a traveling peddler named Jared Garrity arrives in a little recently renamed town of Happiness, Arizona, offering to bring the townsfolk dead back from their Boot Hill. Actually, my hometown is named Gravel Hill, which is the name of the big cemetery in Texas, but they call it Boot Hill. So that's my connection. Initially, you do not believe him, but when he appears to resurrect a dead dog struck by a traveler's horse-drawn wagon, they believe him. After performing the resurrection ritual, Garrity, in seemingly casual conversation, reminds the people about the dead and departed, almost all of whom were murdered, who died having a score to settle with whom, and so forth. The townsfolk grow uncomfortable at the thought of facing problems they thought buried with the dead. When one apparent rescuee is seen approaching town, a man believes him to be his brother, whom he himself had shot, so the man bribes Garrity to reverse the ritual, and the figure vanishes. Ultimately, everyone in town similarly plays Garrity to not revive their loved ones. And the most interesting one was a man claiming that his large wife has broke his arm 6 times. There's a sheriff who allegedly shot a gunslinger in the back, backed by 5 or 6 deputies, and a woman that basically doesn't want her husband to come back because he's a cheapskate. But the one who shot the brother were running the saloon and explaining why this is now called Happiness. Later that night, of course, everything's not as it seems. Garrity and his assistant Ace, who was both wagon driver and resurrectee, ride away with the money, joking about how they can actually bring the dead back to life. Now, his assistant Ace, I guess, is a professional actor who can play different parts. They had simply performed a few smoke and mirrors tricks to con the townsfolk and use a dog that was alive the whole time, but simply knew how to play dead. But something doesn't make any sense. When the Ace character is walking towards town, in the video, he completely disappears. So we don't know how they do it, but there's where you have it. After you have left the town, the last scene reveals that the dead really are rising from the grave, with one commenting that the peddler underestimates his own ability. One revived person is looking forward to getting back into town to get caught up in his drinking. A revived criminal has unfinished business with the sheriff. And a woman, not too nice looking, Zelda Guberman, great name, plans to break her husband's arm for what she sees in him. As Garrity continues to ride away from Happiness, Arizona, the final shot shows the deserted Boot Hill Cemetery. Exit Mr. Garrity, a would-be charlatan, a make-believe con man, a sad misjudger of his own talents, respectfully submitted from an empty cemetery on a dark hillside as one of the slopes leading to the Twilight Zone. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, John Denner is just tremendous in this episode, and of course has John Mitchum as Ace. Now, the story was based on a 1873 incident in Alta, Utah, in which a stranger arrived in a mining town and offered to raise the dead. Initially optimistic, residents reconsidered after reflecting on the potential complications of those who had heired property and those who had remarried after their spouses died. They collected $2,500, equivalent to $64,000 in 2024, to persuade the stranger to leave town without following through on his offer. Now, sports writer Mike Rogolis read about the incident in the American Guide series and wrote about it for a 1963 article in the Salt Lake Tribune. The Alta ski area reprinted the article the following winter in her newsletter, where Serling read it while visiting the resort. And of course, the episode appeared just a few months later. Now, how good is this episode? The special effects at the end. It's not close enough to see a zombie rising, but this is, again, a zombie episode of The Twilight Zone. But it was very comedic because who are they talking to as they come out of the graves? Are they talking to each other, or are they talking to, whoever had the guiding hand? Now, John Denner, the native of Staten Island, was probably one of the most underrated stage and film actors of his era. He worked for about 50 years, a very Renaissance guy, did stage and worked for Walt Disney, different companies. But most of the parts he was in, ladies and gentlemen, he stood out because he could do everything. He actually was an animator on Fantasia in 1940 and continued on with many Disney roles as either a cameo or a voice. Now, what he's really best known for as he got older, of course, was the Barbary Pirate. It was very big. And he did Aladdin's Lamp. He played a whole bunch of characters. Now, he had an interesting role in The Canadians in 1961 as Frank Boone. Was in the Twilight Zone episode The Jungle, which kind of, didn't show his big talent. But episodic TV was just tremendous through the years. And, of course, his last big role for a lot of people was not only the Winds of War series, but Airplane 2, the sequel. And, of course, he was in The Right Stuff, the Oscar-winning movie. So in a 50-year career, what he brought to the Twilight Zone was a gravitas and a game. Now, he did appear in 3 episodes, as well in the Lonely, as Alan Richards in The Jungle, and again, Miss Garrity in The Graves. Now, Denner's performance in the latter episodes showcases one example of his talent for projecting subtle humor. Mark Scott Zickery, in his great Twilight Zone companion book, highlights that quality in Denner's portrayal of Garrity, describing the actor as marvelously dry as a con man. You believe every word that's out of his mouth is a lie, and there's going to be a monetary benefit. But it's so he plays the character this way. Everybody's making a list of who they don't want coming back, and he's going to look at that and tell everybody not to come back. So I would figure the amount of people who were in the bar at the time, it's got to be at least $20,000. This is a very, very a good episode to watch with a cup of tea or a piece of cake because you'll laugh your head off. And ironically, it's on Sydney TV. In streaming syndication. You can get all the episodes. Do you know that the Twilight Zone episodes are ranked 7+? So it means people under the age of 6 should not be watching them, but people over the age of 7 are okay. So that's kind of freaky. So I give this one of the few episodes, I give it a 5 out of 5, not because it's the best episode going, but what it does and presents. There's never been a TV episode like this that put zombies in such a comedic form. And when he not only raises them from the dead, he gives them their original bodies back. So it's not creeping flesh or bugs and cockroaches and all that. It's a great episode. So if you like what we're doing here, we're our Twilight Zone recap episodes. Let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share.